Corey Mosley.
Good that did that for me. All right, we don't have a lot of time together, so I've got to get right to work. I want to accomplish three things with the time that we have together. Number one, I want to give you some thought starters. Number two, I want to give you some challenge questions. And three, I want to give you an action plan. Does that sound good? Yes. All right, so I want to move immediately to everybody's hands in the air, because I need your declaration. So let's get to your declaration. Everybody's hands in the air. Yes, there is involvement here today, right? So I want to say three things to you. Number one, I promise to keep an open mind. I promise to focus on the things that I can control, so the things that I can't control won't matter.
I promise to focus on the things that I can control, so the things that I can't control won't matter.
Yeah, I need LA with me everywhere. All right. And the last one, someone's trying to get in the password. The last one is, I promise to put into action the things I learned today. All right, fair enough. Here's what we're going to cover today. Number one, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. How many people in this room, this is the first time you've ever heard of me in your life until right now? Okay, it's a great ego check because I keep thinking I'm famous, but you all remind me I'm not. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about myself. We're going to talk about the case for change because as the saying goes, change is easy. You go first. So we're going to talk about why change is important, but I'm here to speak to the point about positioning and why you need to get positioned for growth, how we can't simply mandate the action to take place. So we're going to talk about positioning. I'm going to give you what I call my 5 pillars to get positioned for growth, and I'm going to give you an action plan to take with you. Does that sound good? Yes. All right, makes a lot of sense. Great. So when I talk about this idea that we cannot mandate productivity, what happens in the environment is we will say things like the dealer said to me, which was, Corey, you know what? I've decided we're going to be like the Ritz-Carlton. This is a real conversation. We're going to be like the Ritz-Carlton. If a customer wants to know where the bathroom is, I don't want them to point to it. I want them to show them where it is, take them and walk them there. He said, but they're having a problem understanding that. I said, well, let me ask you a question. Is it possible that you held a meeting, you said in the meeting, we're going to be more like the Ritz-Carlton, and then you adjourned the meeting? He said, well, not quite, and not quite, by the way, means that's exactly what happened. I said, Norm, you cannot mandate productivity. I said, let me ask you a question. Has your GSM ever been to a Ritz-Carlton? Has he ever stayed at a Ritz-Carlton? Does he even understand what the experience is? Because, see, the lens that we look through is very variable, right? How many people like a good steak in this room? Anybody any steak? Okay, we got good steak. Now, if I asked you, where's a great steakhouse? And you told me, as a gentleman did one time, he said, Corey, I had a great steak. I said, ooh, I'm intrigued because I love steak. Where'd you go? He said, this steak was cooked to perfection. I said, where is it? I need to go to this place. He said, we were at Applebee's. So what that immediately told me is that this guy knows nothing about where to get a good steak. But in his mind, he had had the best thing. See, that's the problem when we just say we're going to make a change and we think it's going to be activated or we think it's going to be immediate. And that's what we're going to get in here today. Dale Connor, you said, today is the tomorrow you were worried about yesterday. So we don't fear change. The goal isn't to fear it. The goal is to have a plan on how we implement it. Would anybody in this room disagree with the fact that the car business is significantly different than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago? I come from an era, any Kia dealers in the room? Any Kia dealers? Anybody sell Kias in the room? One. So I come from the era of the Cephia and the Sportage. I come from the era of Kia where just by talking about it right now, we've set somebody's check engine light off. You rolled the window up too fast, check engine light went off. I come from the era where they used to put a Briggs & Stratton lawnmower engine in a Hyundai. You ever try to take a Hyundai Excel up a hill back in the late 90s? It was struggling. So I come from that era. Now, fast forward today, look at a brand like Kia or Hyundai competing at the highest levels. Now, that didn't happen overnight. They didn't just wake up and go, we're going to build a great car. That took a long time. I started with that brand in the late 90s. So now here we are today. So that change has a process. And that's what we really want to cover here. When I look at the 5 pillars that we're going to break down, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some action items and some thought starters on each of these different levels. And that's what we will accomplish. So when I look at those 5 pillars, what do those look like in my world? And we talk about positioning, when we talk about trying to get from where we are now to where we want to go. One by themselves does not create large revenue or does not create groundbreaking revenue. What we're trying to get is we're trying to burn on all cylinders in these 5 key areas. And every business growth challenge you will ever have in your business, whether it's at your dealership or it's within your companies and corporations, will fall under one of these 5 pillars. So when I talk about that as stated on the screen, we're talking about number 1, mindset, sales, marketing, operations, and then our people. Now, singularly, it doesn't have to be groundbreaking because groundbreaking is not the goal. The goal here is to be able to systemize our growth, to be able to predict our growth, to be able to control what happens in the growth environment. Because all too often we will talk about all of these things that we can't control, as we said, right? The economy, who's buying, no one's buying, the banks aren't buying like they should be, they're not going deep enough, trade values are out of, we can always find something to drive ourselves crazy, right, Rob? Because there will always be something in the marketplace. But when we go back to this and we set out a plan to say, hey, we are going to make a conscious effort to grow, this is our opportunity, and these 5 pillars are where we will get it done. So I want to break each of these down for you so you have some takeaways from them. Number 1 we're going to talk about is the idea of mindset. Now, mindset is something we'd all agree with. We've got, how many people in here consider themselves high performers? Yep, most of the room, right? Because that's where we come. This is where high performers come to get together. We come to conferences, we come to events, we read books, we take on that education. But you've got people back at your store, you have people that you lead that may not have the same approach to mindset. So let's talk about 3 areas when it comes to mindset right now. I want to start with what Socrates said. He said, there is only one good, and that's knowledge, and only one evil, and that's ignorance. And why there's so much power in that quote is the idea of continuous learning. I meet so many people who have gotten to a level, put themselves in park, for an automotive pun today, but put themselves in park, and then they stop the learning process. So the best education that their team can get, the best education that their leaders can get, is the education level that they stopped at. And that's a danger when we're talking about growth, right? Because effectively, growth comes from us doing something different tomorrow than we did, in fact, today. Inside this chasm of mindset, I want to talk about 3 key points when we talk about mindset. Number 1 is this idea that we have to understand that success is a menace. Bill Gates actually said it. He said, success is a menace. It convinces smart people that they can't lose. The challenge with an organization right now that is successful, that is doing well, is the possibility of becoming stuck, stalled, or stagnant. And because business erosion is not a singular event, it is death by 1,000 cuts. You wake up one day, we saw this during COVID. I'm fortunate enough, I've spent a great deal of time, of course, in the auto industry. But I'm fortunate enough to work with businesses all over the country in all different fields. And we saw a lot of the attitude over COVID was businesses getting punished for not being positioned. Restaurants going out of business because they had neglected online ordering for 4 or 5 years when they should have set up those systems. They pushed certain things out of the way that they should have done. So success can be a menace, and we have to have that mindset and change our mindset in that particular area. The second thing is that your beliefs will drive your attitude will drive your actions, and your actions, of course, will drive your results. Now, the power in that is being able to take a systematic approach to how you can change your mindset, right? As the high performers in the room, you bear the task. Roy, you bear the task to go back to your store and light your team up, to keep your team engaged, to keep your team ready to work. But you need a system, and we got to systemize that. Otherwise, we're my guy from the beginning who walked into the meeting and simply said, here's what we're going to do. Let's go get him, Rob. Right? Big problem in that area. Number 3, we've got to end what I call who else itis. Now, when you think about itis, we typically refer to that as a medical condition, correct? Who thinks of bursitis, right? What do you got? You got bursitis, you got bronchitis. None of that sounds good. One of the biggest problems we have in our industry is something called who else-itis. You want to know what who else-itis is? Yeah? No, you don't want to know? Yeah. Oh, okay. He wants to know. All right, I wanted to make sure. I wanted to make sure are we here? Yeah. Okay. Who else-itis is when you look at a product or service, similar to the products and services that you have in here today, you look at those and you go, you know what? These things really could impact my business. But you know what? What's your name, sir, in the middle? Jimmy. Jimmy's shown the product. He's shown the service. You're like, this is very interesting, Jimmy, but let me ask you a question. Who else is doing this? And the answer that Jimmy gives you makes the determination as to whether or not you will take action. And that's a great tragedy in our business. Because we let who else is doing something. Well, you know what, Jimmy? Don't buy it now. Let me wait till I get the other 14,122 dealers on the program, and then I'll bring it back to you. We have a fear in this industry of going first. There's so many great products and services in the marketplace. Now, I'm not talking about drive yourself crazy by saying yes to everything. But if you look at something that can really practically impact your business, just because they are new or started up doesn't mean there's not an opportunity. I don't know any other way to get a competitive advantage. During COVID, like many people, I decided to continue to educate. So one of the things I did is I attended some courses through Wharton School of Business. And one of the first things they talk about in their scaling methodology is how you get FMA. FMA, does anybody know what FMA is? FMA, what is it? Say it. Fear of missing out. Well, FMA out, A? That's FOMO. FOMO is fear of missing out. FMA is first mover's advantage, right? That is the corporate Silicon Valley high-level terminology for getting a competitive advantage. I cannot get a competitive advantage in a marketplace if I cannot achieve a first mover's advantage. So when you look at some of the technology, when you look at some of the software that you're seeing and opportunities that you have, I encourage you all from a mindset perspective to remove that idea of who else is doing it as an indication of the steps that I need to take. Does that make sense? All right. Let's move to sales. So from a sales perspective, what do we want to talk about? I'm going to give you 3 key takeaways here. Because my goal with our time is to send you back to the store to ask these questions and to say, how well are we positioned for growth? Jokoro Kano, who is the founder of Judo, he said, if there is effort, there is always accomplishment. Would we agree that we are never standing still? We are either moving forward or we're going backwards. Is that fair? Yes. Is that, Karen's here, is that fair? Yes. So we want to take action steps, and let's look at the action steps that we can take from a sales environment to move forward. This PowerPoint does not want to participate today. Okay. So let's look at our key points here when we talk about get position. Number 1, what is the value first strategy inside your dealership? What value do you deliver to the customer in variable, fixed ops, service drive, when they walk through the door, from the website? What is the value first strategy that you give inside your organizations? How do you create an environment of trust inside the organization? How do you create an environment where, frankly, you don't have separation when it comes to vehicles now? Where are my travelers, guys who travel often? You're using the Hertz and the Enterprises, and you're using the rental car lanes. Yes, who's living out of rental cars? Anybody doing a lot of traveling in here? Yeah, tell me when you look down the line, you can tell exactly what car belongs to what brand. We can't anymore, right? Anybody here got a brand new looking facility? Your facility, brand new image facility as they call it. Anybody under construction right now on a new image facility? Yeah, and then the last one always gets the rest of the hands. How many people have the manufacturer highly suggesting that they go ahead and start a renovation, right? Yeah, dump $8-10 million into your building right away, ASAP, preferably. So we're all in a stage now where we have similar facilities, we have similar vehicles, and most of you now stop serving Sanka, right? My millennials don't get that in here. Who remembers Sanka coffee here? I know my old schools remember Sanka, right? So now you can get a decent cup of coffee. You can actually get a Starbucks at a dealership now. Don't be fooled, though, by the Starbucks machine, because I got a dealer who's notoriously known to be frugal, as I would refer to him as. And I said, man, you got a Starbucks machine. You're really stepping up. He said, Corey, ain't put Starbucks coffee in there in 6 months. My service manager goes to Costco and we put that coffee right in there. Nobody knows the difference, right? So it's the effort that counts, I think they'd say, right? All right. So assess your value first strategy. Number 2, challenge your sales versatility. When I talk about that, when I make a statement like sales versatility, what are the modalities that you adapt to when it comes to engaging your customers? A lot of conversation about AI, a lot of conversation about SMS and text messaging, a lot of conversation about keeping it old school a little bit in terms of working phones, conversations about emails. What is the versatility? What I find too often is people will abandon one thing for another instead of create a blended approach. The fact of the matter is that you don't have one type of buyer, right? There's not one type of customer. So to change a complete process to accommodate a potential buyer or a percentage of buyers, because we saw a slide about a stat, and to abandon the process, you could be alienating a completely different group of customers. So my challenge is to look at what our versatility is. What do we have in store for the people who want to buy purely by text messaging? What do we have in store for the people who want to FaceTime and chat before they come in? What do we have for people who still want to engage via email? How is that strategy versatile? I walked to the store a few years ago and they took out the big laminated, hope nobody here's got the big laminated guest sheet that's got all the questions on it, and they sat it down. This is a public group, by the way. Sat it down, and the guy wanted to take me through the flip sheet of their sales process. You don't have to know me, but if we just agree we're all high achievers, how many high achievers would sit through the laminated plastic flip chart presentation of questions and answers? Now, I understand why these processes get created. These processes get created because they're the safest thing. If you're not training your people properly, it's the safest thing for them to be able to do to not put you in a trick bag inside the store. Because if I walk them through the guest sheet, I can at least get this information. But they certainly were not equipped to help me buy in the way that made sense for me. Not give up control of the deal, but to help me buy in a way that worked for me. And finally, number 3, this one I get a lot of interesting commentary on. You got to realize that best practices kill sales growth. And why that is such a controversial statement is a lot of people strive for best practices. I've created best practices for many manufacturers. In fact, if you are an Audi dealer in here, if you are a Volkswagen dealer in here, if you are a Volvo dealer, a Mercedes dealer, or a GM dealer, chances are I have created some content that you use every day in some capacity. Only if you like it, it was me, right? But the problem with best practices is for something to become a best practice, it means it's been done over and over again, and it has been normalized. Can't get first mover's advantage if I've got normalized processes and I'm doing things that everybody else is doing. So if you're training based on best practices, if you're taking information in based on best practices, if you're asking from your vendors or asking from your trainers or your consultants or your coaches in your organization to give you best practices, you're asking the wrong question. So I'm going to challenge you in that area. All right, Looks like a delay on this thing here. Okay, let's talk marketing. Seth Godin said, the cost of being wrong is less than the cost of doing nothing. And I want you to think about that for a second. Because we suffer from who-else-itis, but we love to suffer from paralysis through analysis. We'll sit on a decision. I've been in dealerships, I've been working with dealers for 20 years. Many times we talk about the pitches that the vendors give or the pitches that the consultants give. You know how many times I've been pitched that, Corey, we're ready to take the next step, we're ready to go to the next level, we're going to do whatever it takes. I'll clear out this whole side of the showroom and we're going to reevaluate and reimagine it so we can implement these processes. And it's 3 months later and we haven't bought a computer yet. So we have to realize that inaction is costing us dollars every day. And I've had this conversation with dealers for 20 years. I've got a much more interesting client who is losing $100,000 a month and wants to learn how to get it back than I do convincing someone who hasn't seen the extra money yet that there's an opportunity for them to get it. It's a much different equation. It's a much tougher haul. And that statement is very important because it should give us the idea that inaction costs us more money than taking action does every day of the week. All right, let me give you 3 situations inside of marketing. Number 1, you've got to ask yourself the things that you are offering your customers. I'm talking about your unique selling propositions. I'm talking about your why buys. I'm talking about the reasons they should be doing business with you. It has to be tangible is greater than intangible. What do I mean by that? It is more valuable to a consumer to know that you do $200 worth of dent repair in their vehicle for the first 3 years than it is that you won the President's Award. I'm not taking away anything that's a point of pride for you, but the reality of it is I spent several years doing exit interviews, customers coming out of F&I. Why did you buy a vehicle? What was a deciding factor? Never in all those years did I ever have someone pull me over and go, you know what, Corey? It was that President's Award that sent me over the edge. It just doesn't happen that way. You doing lifetime state inspections for a customer is more powerful than your 100 years in business. Not taking any away from the value of that. Second generation, third generation ownership. Not taking away from the value of that. But it doesn't drive the sale. Or else every mom and pop organization would still be in business and Walmart wouldn't exist, right? So number 2, stop ignoring marketing channels that you don't understand. See, the very interesting hierarchy we have in the car business is we've got deciders, right? And those deciders can take on the form of dealers, they can take on the form of executive managers, they can take on the form of GMs, depending on the hierarchy. But we have this hierarchy. And it's the hierarchy that decides, not the group that decides, right? Why aren't there 500 people in this room here? There's 500, there's enough value, there's millions of dollars worth of value in this lineup over the next 3 days. The reason why there aren't 500 people in the room right now is because there were singular deciders who said, you know what, I'm not going to allow my people to get this information. I'm not going to invest in their ability to get this information. That's a block on progress. And why that's important is, when it comes to marketing, is that's the same thing that happens because we have heard people say, Corey, I don't use that TikTok nonsense. I don't want that in my store. We're not going to do anything with that TikTok stuff. I don't use it. So we ignore it. We ignore the marketing channel because purely we don't necessarily understand it or we don't use it. We've seen this evolve. How many people in this room have been in the car business longer than 10 years? Start with an easy one. 10 years. Okay, so if you've been in the car business longer than 10 years, you have been around long enough to know that there was a time, albeit sounds crazy now, that we installed software on the computers that stopped you from going to YouTube, to Facebook. It was called WebSense. Anybody had WebSense installed on the computers in their dealership? And that was a vehement, intentional approach. Corey, they're not going to be on that social media stuff all day in my store. We just installed this software. Going to block them. Now we should be begging them to master social media, build their brands. The things that several people are doing, the things that people like Tiana are doing and we're doing as well. So, number 3, focus on clarity and not the gimmick. A lot of times we're so focused, and I've been in these meetings, where it's core. We need to come up with something pithy, here to drive that traffic, something pithy. No, how about we answer the phone correctly? How about we respond to a lead? I sit in this room yesterday and listen to some of the speakers, and if I closed my eyes and if I didn't know what year we were in, I've been in this game since the late 90s. If I didn't know what year we were in and you asked me to guess the year, I could have easily told you 2002, 2004, 2006. When I listened to Katie talk earlier this morning, talking about something as simple as not paying attention to women buyers or saying things like, go get your husband. If you asked me what year it was, I might tell you it was 1998. And that's the great tragedy. That's also why a lot of times we hear about the same people over and over again in our business, the constant innovators. The goal is for us all to have the innovative spirit and take action on it. So I just encourage you to figure out what's the quickest way to get clear with a customer. Clear expectations, clear with the buyer, help them understand, reduce buyer apprehension. All right, operations. Peter Drucker said, we must prepare to learn, unlearn, and relearn in order to survive in the future. He also said an organization must be prepared to abandon everything they do today in order to survive in the future. And from an operational standpoint, how does that play right now in your dealership? 3 points on this. Number 1, I talked about earlier, stop mandating productivity. Steve Jobs said, you cannot mandate productivity. It's an organization's responsibility to give its team the tools they need to be successful. And that's very important. If you are not hitting your numbers, sales effectiveness numbers, service absorption numbers, sales numbers for dealerships, rooftop sales, we've got to go back and say our change can't simply be mandated. Number 2, you got to ask yourself, is this customer focused or dealer focused? And the third one here is continuous development. Continuous development. All right. People, then we're going to get to an action plan. Doug Cognan, he's a former CEO of Campbell Soup. He said to win in the marketplace, you must first win in the workplace. I go to dealerships all over the country. I go to the nice service lounges. I see the nice beverages, the LaCroix and the Pellegrino, the Starbucks. Then I go into the employee lounge and I see every mismatched chair, mismatched table, broken refrigerator, handle broken on the microwave. Welcome to our dealership. We love you as employees. Let me eat that guy's sandwich. All right. So I want to give you these 3 takeaways, and then we've got to wrap up. Stop making rescue hires. Do not make hiring decisions based on people you are trying to hire to save your business or save the situation. I've seen BDCs close because one person quit. Don't get that. Number 2, understanding that interviewing is a skill. It's not sell me this pin anymore. Even though the sales manager has to manage the team, he or she may not be the best person equipped to be doing that interview. Interviewing is a skill. Hiring great people is a skill. It's not something you get because you have the title of manager. Also, I encourage you all, you need to be implementing a 90-day stay plan. We tell people they're hired, they're at-will employees, we can fire them for any reason, welcome. What's the 90-day stay plan? What actions will you take in a 90-day period to ensure your people succeed? All right, I want to give you an action plan, but first I need you to pull out your phones because Position for Growth is my new book. It's coming out this summer. You've got a preview of it today. Dealer Synergy, Internet Sales 20 Group is making copies available to you. Here's what you have to do if you'd like to get a free copy. Pull out your phone, hit this QR code. Hit this QR code right now. Do not email Karen, do not email Sean, do not email Tiana. Say, hey, can I get that book? Hit the QR code here. Everybody got it? Got it? Fill that information out and we will get you a copy of your free book. All right, and if you don't have it, the other thing we'll do, we'll give you instant access to the presentation. All right, let me give you your action plan and I'm gonna get out of here. Position for growth, conduct your own 5 pillars assessment. Everything that you just heard today, I want you to go through your own assessment within those 5 pillars. Number 2, ask the 3 magic questions. Why do we do it now? Or what are we doing now? Why do we do it that way? And is there a more effective way to do it? And then, of course, take relentless action. Thank you, guys. Thank you, LA. Thank you, Dealer Synergy, Internet Sales 20 Group. Thank all of you guys.
Thank you, Corey. Listen, if you don't have access to Bradley On Demand, you're missing out on crucial information. The top automotive groups like Coons, Lithia, and Norm Reeves have all used Bradley On Demand to train their teams. And guess what? The world's #1 car salesman, Cody Carter, shares his exclusive strategies right here. You want his secrets? You gotta have Bradley On Demand. Stop waiting and start winning. Dominate your market. Click the link and get access now.